The calendar says July. You know what that means? It means we're halfway home, baby. Let's go ahead and talk about the first half of 2022. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back to talk the first half of 2022. We're going January through June here. What this is really, guys, just kind of taking a look at the first half of the year, kind of where we stand, some of my favorite books I've read at this point, some of the most popular content, how the channel's doing, all of those fun things, because it's always kind of fun to take a look back at a month, but it's even more fun to take a look back at 6 months. So it's kind of like I said, just halfway home is the only way I can really put this, and there's lots of things that actually surprised me kind of going through the numbers here. But let's begin, guys, with what have I read so far in 2022. I've read 50 books. No, it's not as good as it sounds, guys. 12 of those were manga, 38 have been novels, and there is one DNF in there. And if you've been watching the channel recently, you know what that is, because apparently it's been a very controversial decision. But let's kind of look at some of these most read authors I've had during this stretch here. Now, Kentaro Miura, again, was 6. He was my most read at this time last year, so whenever you're reading those Berserk volumes, they can pile up really, really quick, and there are a lot of them to kind of go through. Michael J. Sullivan, I've done 4. All of those have been in the Legends of the First Empire series, but always fun to see Sully so high on this list. Tad Williams, I've got at 4, technically 3, even though To Green Angel Tower can be 2 parts, depending on how you view it. Some people have it in the 2 parts, some people don't. Some people get mad when you try to count it as 2. Well, you know what? I'm counting it as 2. Get mad. Get mad. Makoto Yukimura, this is the author of Vinland Saga. Now I read 4 omnibus of that, which is basically almost twice the size of the Berserk ones that I've read. So I definitely think that that's kind of a cheat there. You're never going to go too far on a list like this for me and not see Stephen King. Now, there are 4 Stephen King books on here. And as we continue into the multiverse and continue that revisit to the Dark Tower, I think that number will remain to be close to what it is. About 1 per month usually is kind of how it falls here on the channel. Now, with the entrance of Robert McCammon recently, which I've only has 2 on here, that's going to kind of take into some of that extra time I have to reread some King books, but always fun to see the King on here. Jay Kristoff, Joe Abercrombie, Bernard Cornwell, and R.A. Salvatore all have 3. Actually, Joe only has 2. I haven't finished that third Shatter Sea book yet, so I take that back. So I had Jay Kristoff, that was Nevernight, Bernard Cornwell, that was the Warlord Chronicles, and R.A. Salvatore was my first trip through the Legend of Drizzt in Forgotten Realms. So I think a nice little assortment of authors there. It's a much more varied than usual, I think. And I think a big part of that is because I have decided to start reading like trilogies and stuff like that in 1 month in succession. That way it helps keep I don't want to say it avoids burnout as much as I feel like if you take a month to read a book and you read 3 or 4 books between that, sometimes you can kind of get distant on it. I think it helps on some series, and some series it's fun to read them all back to back to back. If they aren't big honkers, I think reading them all in succession is a great plan. At least it has been for me, because I think back a couple years ago when I first started this channel, I started like 6 book ones at once, and I think I've only finished 2 of those series up to this point. So I think it can actually be detrimental to it, spreading it out over the course of months. But there we go, guys. So I think the big thing here is going to be to talk about my top 10 books up to this point in the year. Now, I want you to understand, guys, these are not ranked. I saved my ranking for the end of the year. So these are not ranked. They're just the 10 best books I feel like I've read up to this point, out of the 50 that I've done so far. Now, I also do not count rereads. So nothing that I've already read before will I count on here, because I feel like that's just cheating. It's giving it too much time in the limelight. But let's go ahead and kick this off, guys, with The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. I think that was my favorite of that series because I love beginnings. I know, like, for example, I loved Empire of Silence the best and Sun Eater, and like almost no one besides me has that as their favorite. I love beginnings. I feel like you're getting to know the characters the most. Being a character guy, I think that the first book is really where the author is focused on developing that character, getting you invested in those characters. And Tad is no stranger when it comes to developing some characters, and he does a great job introducing this world, introducing you to the main players, and really just kind of getting you involved in this quest and having lots and lots of questions right off the bat. So I think that's a series that stayed pretty consistent along the way, but you're making me pick a favorite one. I got to go with Dragonbone Chair. Now, one where it wasn't Usually you hear this thing about middle book syndrome. Not the case when you talk about Nevernight. By Jay Kristoff, I got to put God's Grave on here because I think the middle book was by far my favorite. And I think that's because, guys, I love me some gladiator story. I love people being thrust into the arena, having to fight. Maybe against your will, maybe not. I don't want to get too far into it. But with God's Grave, he took everything that was great about the first Nevernight book and just cranked it up and added a little bit of Ridley Scott's Gladiator in there. And I was definitely here for it to the point where I was almost shouting Maximus while I was reading it because it was just that good. So I think that was just a very misunderstood series among booktubers who just really just trash that series. And I just say you're missing out, guys, because Mia is a great character and God's Grave is just an awesome, awesome story. If you love the arena battle, I think that you're going to have a great, great time with that one. So I would definitely recommend it. I got to put Upgrade by Blake Crouch on here because Blake Crouch continues to just be the heir apparent to Mr. Michael Crichton, my second favorite author of all time. And I think Blake Crouch is continuing to fill those shoes. I didn't like Upgrade as much as I like Dark Matter and Recursion, but those were damn near perfect techno thrillers. So that is a high, high measuring stick. But you know what? You never ever are bored reading a Blake Crouch book, and you never ever lack for thrills. He definitely has that in this book. A very interesting concept. He's messing with gene editing this time, and these are the kinds of science things that always Mr. Crichton would do and make you take a step back and be like, maybe humanity could do this, but they probably shouldn't be messing with it. I think that's one thing that he captures the same way that Mr. Crichton did. So Upgrade coming out very, very soon, guys. So you guys, I hope you will be picking that up. Sometime next week is release day, and there'll be a little bit of coverage for it here on the channel, I think. Maybe even a little brief conversation with the author of said series. Who knows? Stay tuned. I got to talk about Sun Eater. I did kind of talk about Empire of Silence here for a second, but the newest Sun Eater book, Kingdoms of Death by Mr. Christopher Ruocchio, continues this crazy, crazy epic saga of Hadrian Marlowe. And what I like about this one is, I think Jake Bishop put it the best when he said that Christopher Ruocchio chose violence with this book, because this is by far the darkest and most grim book in the Sun Eater saga. And that's amazing when you're talking about a series of the guy who blows up a sun, right? So the fact that he's able to take so many things that I didn't know I was particularly caring about, and then when bad things happened, I was like, what are you doing? Why are you being so mean to us? You know, so for me, I love grimdark. I wouldn't really classify this grimdark as much as it's just very grim. There are some bad, bad things that happen, and just when you think it can't get any darker, Chris is like, hey, hold my beer. So I definitely think that he is pretty much hitting his stride as the series is nearing its end here. And I think people that were worried about this book being split into two books, is that the first half was going to be kind of slow. Definitely not, guys. So it definitely does not feel like a half of a story. So I'm very excited about what Christopher's doing here, and I can't wait to see what happens in the second half of that story with Ashes of Man this fall. And I think it might be a battle between those two as to which one might end up on my top 10 of the year. We shall see, guys, because I don't do repeats. In case you want to go ahead and get that off here, I don't do repeat authors on top 10 lists. So there we go. Best of the best. How about Hunger of the Gods? John Gwynne, Old Vicious Pen, continues to just rack them up for me. The guy is, 9 for 9 for me now with his books? That's incredible. Even Joe Abercrombie wasn't 9 for his first 9 with me. So I think that John Gwynne is truly a special author. He really is someone that just really is writing the fantasy the way that I love to read it. The fact that he's embracing all of the Norse sagas and stuff with the Bloodsworn series just continues to be right in my sweet spot. Seems like this book's going to be a little more mixed amongst the fans than Hunger of the Gods was, or I'm sorry, Shadow of the Gods was. But for me, Hunger of the Gods was just as good. I felt like he does this thing where he will write a POV from a character that is less than likable. And I feel like a lot of fantasy authors won't do that. And I don't want to say ever that you're like rooting for them, but you're kind of just like, I can kind of see where they're coming from. And I've always liked that when an author is able to put you in the shoes of someone that the audience does not like. And he'd be like, look, I don't like you, but I get where you're coming from. And I think that he does that in this book with the 2 new POVs. He really, really does. So John continues to just crush it, and I cannot wait for the conclusion of that series. And I'm still banking on a giant bear being on book 3. I don't know. We shall see. It's very, very exciting to find out what he puts on the front of the next book. How about Exile? This is the middle book in the Legend of Drizzt, the Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvatore. Now, I read that whole trilogy in like a week. I think Exile was my favorite because it had a lot of the politics and stuff I liked on Menzo Branson, but then it also had, our character on the run and kind of getting into the expansive world of Forgotten Realms. And, it was the first time that I had a D&D character that I knew in the Mind Flayers, so very cool stuff. But you get a lot more of Guinevere in that book and things. So I really am enjoying Drizzt as a character, and I can't wait to see how that series continues. But Exile was definitely my favorite of those first three, even though I did like Homeland quite a bit as well. So it was really, really close there, but Exile, I think, is the one that had the best mix of twists and action and character development. So exciting times ahead in the land of Forgotten Realms. This one was hard, trying to pick a favorite of Bernard Cornwell's Warlord trilogy. I think I'm going to go with Enemy of God, because I think that as a dad, it had the stuff that resonated with me the most, because you're dealing with Durfal as a father in that book, whereas the first one, you don't. And in the third one, well, chaos ensues. We'll just leave it that way. But the Enemy of God really did hit a lot of those things for me. Had a lot more character building for some characters that, for if you're like me and you're into like Thomas Mallory's Arthurian legend, I think this really turns some of those things on its head in a respectful way, in kind of a maybe an unreliable narrator kind of way. He really kind of explains that in one of the best ways. And he gives some of those characters like Lancelot, like Guinevere, a little more depth than I was expecting, and definitely in a direction that I wasn't expecting. So the Bernard Cornwell really impressed the hell out of me with Warlord Chronicles. I think that Warlord Chronicles will go down as one of my favorite trilogies ever, and it's definitely not hyperbole. I feel like I'm far enough removed from it now to say I can't say that's recency bias. I just think that is a perfect trilogy. I don't find one thing wrong with it, except that it ended, So I love that. It's got me anxious to read more Bernard Cornwell here in the future. Some people are doing Grail Quest. I'd like to get into Saxon Stories, but you know what? Grail Quest is 3 books. Saxon Stories is 13. Though I think I might know where I'm leaning there. I lied, guys. I do have 2 on this list from the same author, and they are Boy's Life and Swan Song from Robert McCammon, because this is like 2 of my favorite books I've read this year. So I got to have both on here. So, I mean, if you want to count that as one, I guess you can. I'm not really sure. But at the end of the year, I'm going to have to pick between them right now. Boy's Life, amazing coming-of-age story told through the eyes of a preteen. This is the first author since Stephen King I found that can do it in that way that makes you recollect those things from your own childhood, really in that nostalgic way that just hits all the right emotional beats, and you will start thinking of things you haven't thought about in years from your childhood. And I think that he just captures the magic of childhood, just how wonderful it is to like have your bike and things like that, your group of friends that come in and out of your life. I think he just nailed all those things. And then Swan Song, guys. I mean, what can I say about Swan Song besides it's probably the best book I've read this year. I think it is on par with The Stand by Stephen King, and that's a book it always gets compared to. I loved it every bit as much. I liked the things that were different about it just as much. I love both those books. I know that people feel like you got to pick one between The Stand and Swan Song. I'm here to tell you don't. I think they're both fabulous, and they're both different enough that I don't feel like it's the same story being told, except, they're both in dystopian futures, and they both have a dark man in black kind of thing that's kind of messing some things up. So I can definitely see the comparisons, but with me, I love both those journeys, and the reason why, guys, is characters in both of them. And the characters in Swan Song will always stay right here. I'm never going to forget some of those characters. And it's a 900-page book, guys, and I could read it again tomorrow. That's how good it was. So I definitely recommend, guys, if you haven't read Swan Song, do so right now. And last up, guys, the 10th one here, Jade City, Fonda Lee. I reviewed it on the channel recently. I love the Jade City because I love The Godfather, and I felt like this is done just the right way, where it feels like a hat tip to The Godfather, but doesn't feel like a ripoff of it. I definitely think that there's comparisons to be made, but it was perfect timing for me, I think, because I was starting to have a little bit of fantasy burnout. So I was like, okay, well, now I'm starting Jade City, another fantasy book, and I think that book is fringe fantasy at best. I really think that at least in this first book, the magic system is low enough that it almost seems like a valuable resource more than anything, but it is very much an organized crime book, which is something that I absolutely adore. So I'm having a great time with that, and I'm going to be starting Jade War very, very soon, and I'm excited. Actually, by the time you're watching this, I probably already started Jade War, taking that on vacation with me. So I'm excited to continue that world. I love what Miss Lee is doing so far. And I got a little bonus for you here. I guess an honorable mention, if you will. That's just how good of a reading year it's been so far. I got to talk about Call of the Wild by Jack London. It's so short, guys. I mean, I read it in like a day and a half, so that's why I wouldn't really want to put up here with these novels. But it's a novel that has a reputation for a reason. it's just amazing. It's a great story that you got dogs in it. It's always going to have my attention. But the fact that it's from the point of view of the dog is something that was just I was not expecting. And I can see now why so many people name their dog Buck, because I've already decided the next dog that I have, that once my current dog is sadly no longer with us, and basic truths, guys, is they age faster than we do. I would definitely call my next dog Buck. I think that's just such a great story, heartfelt, very emotional. I think that numerous times that book kind of got me in the feels, and the fact that this book was written in 1903 and can still elicit that type of response just tells you how special that book really, really is. So I know I kind of cheated here with like 11, but like I said, if you count the Robert McCammon books as one, in my own screwy way, I think that will be the 10. But it's going to be a race, I think, here at the end of the year. A very good reading year so far. And I am anxious to see what happens in the second half. But for the first half, those are the 10 that I would say have been the best. Let's talk about maybe my most disappointing books so far. Now, these are really series more than books. When I'm talking about the book that kind of like lit it off. Age of Swords, Michael J. Sullivan. I liked Age of Myth. That was book 1, Legends of the First Empire. Age of Swords was terrible. I mean, it was the first time like I was really just like not liking a Michael J. Sullivan book like at all. Didn't like anything he was doing in it. I didn't think anything was really believable. It just kind of took me out of the story. How fast humanity was like advancing. And I mean, they were advancing centuries in a matter of pages with some of the creations that they were coming up with on the fly. Really took me out of it. I felt like a lot of the characters are just carbon copies of each other. Like you could take 6 of these characters and combine them into one and nothing in the story would change. I felt like that. But that series has kind of been just underwhelming for me so far. Not enough to where I would quit. But it's nothing that I'm like, I got to read the next one now. I've only got 2 books left, so I'm going to finish it. But I do really wish I had chose Rhaenyra Chronicles over Legends of the First Empire. But I do like that he is building up the background for the history of Rhaenyra Revelation. So there is that. Next up, probably one that disappointed some viewers the most was Soulsmith by Will White, but Cradle as a whole. This is the one that made me say, Cradle's probably not for me. I'm probably not going to be continuing with that series, guys. This progression fantasy thing, everybody's like, oh, well, if you don't watch anime, you're probably not going to like it. I mean, I've read manga, and I don't remember any parts in Berserk where Guts is like, no, I can't go do that right now because I've got to advance to the next level. That's what this book felt like. Oh my God, we're in great, great danger, but I'm going to leave you there so you can advance to the next level. I'm like, I love playing Final Fantasy. I don't love reading it. So Cradle, I think, is just something that's definitely not for me. It has a huge fandom, so clearly it's doing something right. Again, I'm not taking anything away from it, guys. It's just not my type of fantasy. If it's just about getting power-ups, that's nothing that I'm really, really interested in. So, I gave it a shot. I think 2 books into a series is giving something a shot. I know a lot of people are like, oh, book 3 is when it all changes. But I'm like, when people that have said that, though, they liked the first 2 books. They just didn't love them. I didn't care for either of the first 2 books. So I think it's going to be a miss for me. And then, of course, The 3-Body Problem was my 1 DNF this year by Cixin Liu. And I think that's the one, like I said, kind of controversial. People were just like stunned that I don't like it because they felt like me as a Crichton fan that I'd really like it. I never felt like Crichton ever just got so philosophical that it felt like he was smelling his own farts. That's what that book felt like to me. So it just, I don't really see the comparison there, except that they're both sciencey. They're based off of ideas, more so over character. I don't feel like Crichton ever neglected his characters nearly that much. So, hey, no one series is for everybody, guys. And with Cradle, with Legends of the First Empire, and with Remembrance of Earth's Past, these all have huge fandoms. So obviously they're doing something right. These are just things that they aren't clicking for me, So I don't feel bad walking away from 2 of the 3 there. But I would definitely say those have been the most disappointing to me because I did have high hopes for all 3 of those series. But channel growth so far this year, guys, 10,502 new subscribers. That's down 2012 from last year. That was kind of expected. And that is at this time, at the end of June, at this time last year. Again, some things change. With me, it's always more about engagement, and obviously some of those things that go up. 305,000 hours of watch time is up 51,000 from this time year. So people watching longer is always something that a content creator wants to see. Same with views. 1.9 million views is up 200,000 from this time last year. So again, the 2 of the 3 categories that matter the most, those are seeing green arrows. So that's something as a content creator you want to see. So slower sub count, but greater engagement time is a trade-off I'm going to take every single time. So I'm encouraged about the direction that the channel is heading in. How about some most popular content so far? How about top 10 fantasy series as of 2022. This was my most requested video, without a doubt, the update to that list. 78,000 views as of this recording. So by far, without a doubt, it's blowing away everything else that I put out this year. And people love a top 10, and especially when it's about series. Even though the comments on there are kind of mixed, the feedback is a little mixed. Like I said, I always encourage people to tell me your top 10, so instead of telling me why mine suck, but you put a list out there like that, you're going to hear some of that, and that's fine. That's fine. 12 series that I won't finish. 22,000 views. I think people, they do thrive off negativity sometimes. I feel like I do that in as positive a way possible. I present the book and present why it didn't really work for me. I don't feel like I rant very much on this channel. I try not to be negative on anything. But those are some series I just felt like, yeah, they don't work for me anymore, and I'm going to quit wasting both of our times by reading it. So there it is. Another one I did that I thought was a lot of fun was If You Love That, Try This Next. That had 21,000 views. That's basically a similar series. You like this one series, here's another one that I think that you would really enjoy. Not necessarily the same. I just think that, hey, if you like that, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't like this one. And hey, with that, if I've gotten people to try First Law, I've got people to try Red Rising, things like that, people to try Sun Eater by Chris Verrocchio. I get people to try these series that are a little, maybe not quite as popular as some of the, like, the mainstream stuff out there. Look, those series have big fandoms, but I feel like those are series that every sci-fi and fantasy fan should know right away. Not have to look up and be like, I've never heard of it. I got to check that out. Most anticipated books of 2022 has 19,000 views. That one actually really kind of surprising, because at the time I put it out, it didn't really generate too much interest, but over time it's kind of shot up a little bit. So it's always fun to look ahead and say what you're going to read this year. And the fact that this year I was able to put things on there that I knew for a fact was coming out, looking at you, Pierce Brown, that I knew they were coming out. I think that helped a lot over the year before, where I actually had listed Red Rising. So how about that? And then my 10 most aggressive fandoms that I've encountered on BookTube. 19,000 views. Again, a video title like that, I think people are going to assume that I'm going to be overly negative. Really what that was is it's not. I mean, except for maybe one or two, I really do enjoy those fandoms. They just tend to be a little aggressive if you don't toe the company line sometimes. And it's just me being honest, guys. I always said with this channel, I'm not going to bullshit. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to share, feedback of a lot of things I get that people don't like. And like, for example, guys, I love Dresden Files. I think the Dresden Files, that's why I call the fans the Dresden, P-H-I-L-E-S, Dresden Files, haha. I figured they like that better than Wheel of Time fans love Wheelies, right? Or Green Boners, So, but with Dresden Files fans, I feel like they can be quite aggressive because they love something so much. I get that. Whereas, like the One Piece fans were just like completely shitty to me, and I didn't even read the series or say anything bad about it. So I wanted to kind of just highlight, as a content creator, here's some things that we see. Definitely not anything negative. I don't think so. How about some favorite content that didn't necessarily hit those numbers? I do love all the Tolkien coverage that I've been able to do. Anytime I could talk about J.R.R., I'd love to do it. Been putting it off for a long time. Didn't quite generate the interest that I hoped that it would. I feel like Tolkien is kind of a niche thing almost at this point, because I feel like the generation that grew up with the movies already have kind of moved on to other things, and then everybody else, like me, let's be honest, that isn't a lot of BookTube isn't that age. It is much younger, and much younger audiences aren't crazy about Tolkien. Some of my favorites that I did that really didn't do a ton were my favorite romances, my favorite first lines, and my favorite fathers. Those are just kind of off the wall things I've come up with, like at the last minute. Some things that I think with romance, I get a reputation as a guy who doesn't like romance. Now, I do. I just don't like forced romance. I think everyone can think back to a first line that really grabbed you from go. And then, of course, dads. I mean, I love me some dads in some sci-fi and fantasy, because sometimes they can get kind of a bad rap. So I wanted to put a spotlight on them for Father's Day. Ranking my Stephen King books, part 1 and 2. I know people are anxious for part 3 of that, guys, but there's some rereads and stuff that I have to do. And there's even some things I've never read that I need to do before I do part 3. So I said when I started that it was going to take a while to get through there. So I do apologize, but parts 1 and 2, I did have a great time ranking those, even though I said it was something I probably never do. So it's feeling good to finally start to do that, even if it is going to take a while. It's still a while to go before we get there. And then I just gotta say, I love that people appreciate the weekly updates, because weekly updates is something that I love to do. I get a chance to kind of just talk off the cuff, give you a peek behind the curtain, what's going on in my real life and stuff, some stuff that's maybe not book based. It gives me that outlet to talk about some things that are going on in my life outside of books. And I do appreciate that people do still like to watch those. Sometimes those are my most popular video for the week. So it is basically just a reading vlog and what am I watching kind of thing. I appreciate that you guys let me have that outlet and you show enough interest for me to justify doing those every single week. And how about goals for the rest of the year, guys? I guess I just got to say, look, 75,000 subs was my goal at the end of the year. And we're halfway to 73,000 as I'm recording this. So I think we'll make that safely, unless, there's another controversy involving me. Who knows? While I'm on vacation, who knows? Something I said in one of these videos might, go completely viral and I come back to 50,000 subs. Who knows? Crazier things have happened. But I think my biggest thing is to kind of refrain from starting any more read-alongs. Official ones. I think this Codex Alera was going to kind of be the last one. I think that the Malazan one just took so much out of me, and I had so much support at the beginning, and it lost so much support over time. And then even I kind of said, there's like 5 people left. I'm just going to kind of finish this later. So that's on me. Maybe that one wasn't the best choice for a read-along. I got a lot of people to give it a shot, so I'm happy about that. But just read-alongs just feel like they really just kind of lock you into something that, I think this year I've kind of put a focus on reading freedom, and I want to continue to do that. So I'll still be doing things like, hey, I'm going to read this month. If you want to join me, you can, but it's not like an official read-along on the Discord and all that stuff. But as far as that, no, I think I'm pretty much done with that after we finish Codex Alera here. But I am excited to do that one. But guys, that was the halfway point of the year so far. Had a lot to talk about, so this video is a little longer than usual. But what about you? What's the best thing you've read the first 6 months of this year? I'd love to hear you let me know down in the comments, guys. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you there.